As we've seen, BC has been gripped by a frigid blast of winter these past 2 weeks. People living outside are some of the most vulnerable during the cold and wet weather. Environment Canada issued nearly 24 extreme cold warnings last week across the province, saying frostbite and hypothermia can set in within minutes if people don't have enough protection. There are things you can do to help those most vulnerable this year. Draper is a pastor with 5 and 2 Ministries who works with homeless people in Abbotsford. He's here to tell us 5 ways to help people experiencing homelessness during cold snaps and snowstorms. Ward, thanks for being here. First of all, what can individuals do on those personal levels to support people outside?
One thing I encourage folks to do is to have supplies on hand in their cars, like bottled water, granola bars, mittens, toques, the things you can pick up at the dollar store if you feel comfortable with that, putting together little bags with those things to have available. Also acquaint yourself, if you can, with your services in your city. That's also handy. A lot of cities now have resource guides to get a hold of, and I would encourage you to do that. And another big thing is just keep putting pressure on the government for more housing and support.
When it comes to actually approaching somebody who is outside and you don't know perhaps what state they may be in, what's the best approach that you recommend?
I mean, if you're comfortable with it, I mean, it's obvious. If someone's agitated, don't. But if you feel like you see someone in a parking lot and they look like they need something, just ask. I mean, most of the time you're going to get a warm reception. And I mean, just only if you're comfortable. Don't do it if you don't feel comfortable, if you're not in a space you're not comfortable with. But it's just like meeting anybody else. Just say hi if you're comfortable.
Yeah. On an organizational level, what do you think agencies can do more if they can? And as a pastor specifically, are there things that faith-based organizations do and can do more of?
Well, I mean, the services that faith-based groups do is very valuable, and we definitely could use an increase. I would love to see more temples, synagogues, churches, etc., open their doors and utilize their spaces to meet the needs of those on the streets and also the other marginalized members of our communities whose needs are growing exponentially every day. Turn them into places that are community centers and find creative ways to make those spaces more welcoming.
If you've suggested that to other faith leaders, what do they say?
Well, my experience has been a tooth and nail fight over the last 20 years. It's very hard in Abbotsford, has been to engage the faith community, any of them. It's been a very, very difficult thing. I mean, the main response we get is liability, is what we hear the most often. But I'm a firm believer that if a church or a temple or whatever it may be, you exist to serve your community. And this is an opportunity that there's no shortage of to engage with folks that really need help. And those numbers are not dwindling, and there is more than enough real estate out there in our faith communities where we could actually help folks every single day.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. We hear shelters are full during cold weather. Some people, though, do not want to stay at shelters for various reasons. What are the reasons you hear that people are reluctant to go inside?
Well, there's multiple reasons. You hear the same old ones all the time about not being able to take their stuff in and stuff. But some of it is also policies of the given shelters. They might be a bit too harsh for some people. They might be too prison-like. There are also things like couples not being able to spend time together, not being able to go and share shelter space together. They're very uncomfortable places. And if you've never stayed in a shelter or operated in a shelter or never had the experience, it can be quite dehumanizing, right? They're not always, and this doesn't go for all of them, they're not always very welcoming sight. It's a very regimented spaces, and that too can be very off-putting for people.
Pastor Ward Draper with 5 and 2 Ministries, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, no problem.